Hey, hi everyone. Hi Kanishk. So we are with Kanishk Dondial, a student from UPS Dehradun. Kanishk has really deep interest in data science, and he voluntarily applied for appearing for an interview with us, a mock interview per se. So we'll be discussing and we'll be resuming our mock interview series with Kanishk, and we are happy to have you here. Hi Kanishk, how are you doing?
Hello everyone, I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. I hope you are all are doing okay.
Great, great. Thanks for being here, Kanishk. I hope today's session really covers a very deep fundamentals more than asking questions kind of session. It's a more like a learning kind of session for everyone who's watching and for you as well, Kanishk. We have with us Jayesh Chahar and Mukul Goyal and myself, Divyanshu Vyas. We are going to be banging Kanishk with a lot of questions. So let's see how much we get to learn from Kanishk and how much Kanishk gets to learn from this session. So yeah, Kanishk, how about you give us an interview about yourself?
Okay, so good evening everyone. My name is Kanish Dhondyal, currently a fourth year student at UPS. To begin with, I grew up in Kordar, Uttarakhand and pursuing BTech in computer science, specializing in business analytics and optimization. I always loved data and hidden meaning behind it, which made me an aspiring data scientist. I believe that every piece of data has a story of its own. I have exceptional analytical and problem solving abilities and good visualization skills too. I have internship experience in world's most business intelligence tool used, that is Power BI. I have completed two internships as of now and currently working on a project that is Billionaires Web, which in background is just basically an app that uses machine learning algorithms to predict the prices of Bitcoin. Moving on, I'm a team player and can quickly adopt to new places. Moreover, I always make sure that the people around me or the people working around me are always in their highest spirits. I'm a firm believer in the fact that healthy mind lives in a healthy body, for which I meditate and work out daily. Thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. Great, great introduction, Kanishk. So you are in third year, which year I
Fourth
guess.
year, seventh semester.
Okay, great, great, great to see that you have done two internships. The best way to have a go at data science. So, how about you start sharing about anything that you have that summarizes basically your work history in those internships and any other interesting Kaggle or some
Yeah.
projects that you have done. Yeah.
Okay, so
Internships and projects. Yeah.
let me begin with my internship. Like the recent internship that I did around July was basically I worked at an organization that did EMA solution, and they actually worked around like trading regarding the oil
You
industry.
can share your screen now if you want to.
If you
Okay,
have something
just
to
a second.
share, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
just give me
great.
a second, sure.
Nice. Yeah, sure. Always great to have a presentation for data science
Yeah.
interviews. Great. Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, so I hope you are seeing this,
Yep.
and just let me.
Can do the full screen if possible or zoom it up.
Let me.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is me. This is a little introduction about me. Okay, I'm pursuing undergraduate, highly motivated and team player. I have like hands-on knowledge on experience with various machine learning models such as linear regression, logistic, support vector machine, and k-nearest neighbors. Okay, next is starting with my internships. Actually, I worked like my project that I was assigned over there was basically analyzing power sector core supply analysis. What I did that I made various interactive dashboard in Power BI to help visualizing various aspects like what actually we are dealing with and provide useful insights to the organization. The main thing I did over there was the trend analysis of power plant and coal wise. What actually we did that is that we have a supply demand is basically that we are getting this much amount of coal and how we much we are using, and is it that we are falling short at any point of time. Next is my another internship that I did with Spark Foundation. It was more of a project based internship where I performed exploratory data analysis. Over there I have various features and my goal was to tell that business that okay, here you are falling short, this is the place that you are making most of your losses. I have to help them identify those things by visualizing all those things. So there I performed various statistics analysis and like helping them seeing patterns and all those things through visualizing in Python itself. After that I was able to tell them okay, this is where you are working the worst and this is where you can actually work on to give more profit. Next, moving on to the projects. Currently, I'm working on this project that is Billionaires Web. As I told you, it's a cryptocurrency predictor. In front, we have a Django framework, and in the backend, we are actually using machine learning algorithms to predict the future prices of Bitcoin. It's more of a like in this entire project, we learned a lot of things about time series and its various components like stationary, seasonality, and how you actually say that, okay, this is a time series analysis and we are going to use these algorithms, because there are several algorithms out there which we can implement. In this, currently, we have implemented Arima, okay? And we are moving forward to like also implementing Facebook Profit. And the another one is linear regression with scikit-learn. In what I did that, I have like compared a lot of models, like we have linear regression, then we have polynomial regression, and then further moving on, we have regularization in this last regression, ridge regression, and elastic net. And then after doing all those things, like I have made several models, and in the end of it, I compared the models that which is performing the best. So regarding data science, these are all the things that I have done till now. Thank you.
Okay. So linear regression, you said you have worked on linear regression in this one. So what type of data have you used for this project?
Actually, our data consists of basically some features where we have actually like advertisement data, like how much we are spending on advertising. Like we have TV, we have newspaper, and then we have radio. And how much after spending on, like how much revenue, the profit, the sales we are getting, like after spending things on it. So like at some point, or like when we are using linear, so like at some point there are some features that are getting totally neglected. After using polynomial regression, we get to see that there is synergy between some features. Synergy means that standalone the feature doesn't make any sense, but when combined with another feature, they make sense.
And how does that combining you have done in polynomial
Sorry?
regression? How does
Actually,
that
polynomial
combination of features you have done?
Okay, so actually polynomial regression, what it does, it just takes a degree to it. So let's say that I have 3 features. So what it did, that it squared it to like, and then if I have X, Y, and Z features, okay. So like when you're using polynomial regression, you'll automatically will get a X and Y features together. So like after looking at the coefficient, if they have significant value over there, you can say that, okay, maybe like X was not contributing towards itself or more, but maybe while combining X and Y together, we can see that, okay, there's a significant changes in our
Okay.
sales.
Yeah. So yeah, Mukul, you were saying.
Yeah, Kanesh, can you explain me a little bit about the data science workflow? Because I see you have worked on exploratory data analysis and visualization. So can you explain me, like if we talk about an end-to-end project, so what does all the steps in that workflow involves, and how does it begin, and what all the things that we need to do?
Okay, so actually there were a lot of features in that internship where like they performed exploratory data analysis. The data set was similar along, like we have a superstore data, and what it was, it contains like various like shipments, like what products you are shipping, at what region you are shipping, and like what class you are shipping it from, whether it's a first class or all those things. So first that like beginning, we have to do a little of pre-processing. Like we have to check that whether our data has some missing values or some abnormal values, which we just cannot evaluate. Sometimes you are looking through like data and it has some strings value, which just doesn't make sense. So like first I pre-process my data. And after that, I use top to down approach. Like first I look the data as a whole, and like after visualizing key things, after visualizing like a scatter plot, then moving on to the box plot, and after keep on analyzing this, I just make like taking them into categories, and in the end of the day, I was able to find out like that this is where the sales is like mostly going down.
Yeah, but this is more in reference to the exploratory data analysis. My question was more in like, if we have a problem to solve, so what are the steps that we need to follow?
Yeah.
So
You
it
got
can be
you
start-
got a new data. You got a new data, and you have a problem
Yes,
statement.
okay.
What will be your next steps to do? Right, Mukul?
Okay,
Yeah.
if that's the thing, first of all, like I will definitely start with like validating the data, like making sure the data is coming from the right source. After that, like pre-processing begins, because like messy data doesn't make sense converting to like, basically we have to understand that data, making sure that it doesn't contains any null values. And after pre-processing my data, I'll perform exploratory data analysis, like actually get a hold on to what things that I'm dealing with. Because if
Just
I'm
one
in front,
question. So you will do the exploratory data analysis after pre-processing the data. So
Yes.
basically you have modified the data by yourself, and then after that you are doing the exploratory data analysis. wouldn't it be better to do the exploratory data analysis first before pre-processing the data?
Actually, like before pre-processing, like there, like when in exploratory data analysis, we basically uses a lot of visualizations. Okay, and if there is some like strings values present in the float, then it may throw error. And if there are like null values present or blank values present, then there are things that maybe we won't be able to look data correctly. We will say that, okay, maybe we are missing majority of the points, or maybe if these are some points, they may turn out to be very crucial in the end of the day. So that's why it's better to some, like it's maybe dependent on situation, but like it's usually preferred to do pre-processing before, because if we don't, even after visualizing, maybe we will miss those important features or miss those important points that we may have explored in the exploratory data analysis itself.
Okay.
So what will be the steps in a pre-processing?
Sorry?
What will be the process? What will be the steps in pre-processing? Data pre-processing.
Okay, so the
what will you do?
steps in processing, like we can look at various statistic analysis. Like we can get checking up their means, like checking up their quartiles where the most of the values is falling on.
Is that thing also doesn't come in EDA? You're basically
Actually it does. Actually it does. Like, but pre-processing, actually you can also say that pre-processing also happens like before giving model to the machine learning algorithm itself. So it happens at that point also. Like let's say the thing is that these things sometimes intersect with each other. You cannot just say that you're just using pre-processing and you're not actually looking at it. Let's say I have to interpolate a lots of values, and without actually looking at their median and mean, I just cannot do it. I need to first have a little domain knowledge. So I first have to explore the data a little self. So like it just keeps on happening. Like first, like I do some visualization, then I'll change the data, then I'll do some visualization, then I'll change the data. But like before feeding it to the entire model, first I have to get the hold of that what exactly I'm dealing with. Before feeding it to a model, I must need to know that what kind of data and what my goal is. And that was exploratory data analysis tells you.
Okay. And can you explain me a little bit about like what is the importance of visualization in data science workflow? So one could be like the exploratory data analysis that you talked about. And apart from that, where in the whole data science workflow approach it could be used?
Actually, answering your questions, basically the word visualization means is that it converts the words into a pictorial so that you can easily get your information. So it can be like at the EDA process, and it can be even after you are like you have to tell your machine, like after creating your machine learning models, you have to show the feature importance. Like this is like amount of feature, like this is the feature importance that we have. Like this is how much important this feature is, and how much like at various steps, if you are using elbow methods, let's say you are saying that, okay, if I keep on changing this parameter, how much my model is getting affected. So like as visualization, it just doesn't make sense. It just help you easily visualize things. So it can be helped over there. And like when I worked as a Power BI analyst over there, but Power BI is actually just basically a business intelligence tool, and it helps with lots of visualizations. So over there, when I did trend analysis and I have like using supply and demand. So what I made is actually I just made month over month comparison, year of year comparison, and day of day comparison. Like how much supply we have compared to the previous year, how much supply we have compared to the previous month. So like visualization is there at every point of time. You just have to find the right point to do it.
Okay. And so basically, for example, let's consider a situation like you have your machine learning model ready, and you have to explain those results to the business stakeholders. So what will your approach in doing that? Because business stakeholders are the one who are providing you the resources, and they are basically the ultimate decision makers if they want to employ a machine learning model or deploy a machine learning model or not. So what will your approach to explain what all you did, and how will you basically explain the whole process and the results to them?
Okay, so like it's a difficult thing to say, but what can I say is that I can first of all myself try various models, like first compare their performance, like how much which model is doing good. And in the end of the day, if I have to show my model to someone, I have to make, and there is a chance that there's going to be a like, what can I say, experience gap of learning gap between me and the stakeholders. So I do not want to pick something that is really complex. and so that I can explain it to themselves, because there are some models out there which are may perform really good, but they are too complex to actually relate back to the coefficients. So it's actually keeping in between those things, I have to make a trade-off to see that where I can actually fit it, so that I can get a better performance and I can like easily explain it to themselves in the form is like we have features. We have features in the date, and when we say about feature importance, so I may that in the end of the day I must need to have that confidence to tell them that this is the feature that is more influential in your scenario. So
Okay.
I have to keep those things in mind when creating my model.
Okay. And
Okay. Yeah, Mukul, go ahead. Yeah, complete your
so
question. Yeah.
you have talked about you are familiar with SVM. Can you explain me about like what is the
Okay.
basic idea behind SVM algorithm?
Okay. So SVM stands for support vector machine, and what it actually do is that it can also be used for classification and regression, both of the tasks. And what is do that it uses a hyperplane to give you the answers. It actually uses the concept of soft margin classifiers, and like creating a hyperplane, it classifies this thing on minimizing those margin. It can be also used for regression.
We will be minimizing the margin or maximizing the margins?
Actually, it depends. If you are working with the classification model, our objective is to maximize those margins. But when we talk about in the regression term, those margins turns out to be the error. So we said that we are trying to minimize those errors. Like when we are trying to fit it to the regression model, we are actually trying to minimize those margins. So that's the difference.
And what are
Okay.
support vectors in SVM?
Support vectors are the vectors that are lying on your hyperplane. So these are the one that actually help us to build that hyperplane.
Will support vectors always lie on the hyperplane?
Yes.
Okay.
And you were talking about some margins. So can you tell me what are these margins, hard margin and soft margin? What is the difference?
Okay, so what hard margin is, that hard margin actually, if you look into the history of support vector machine, first hard margins come into the play. But the disadvantage between the hard margin, the disadvantage the hard margin carries is that it won't actually allow anyone to fit inside the margin. First, you have the main separator, that is your hyperplane. And like how we are actually building that hyperplane by maximizing those margins. So what hard margin does is that it doesn't allow any data points to fall inside it. Because of this reason, we may get a really bad model or an overfitted model. But what soft margin does is that it allows some points to actually fit inside those margins, so that we will able to classify them more perfectly. Let's say if we have some overlapping points, if we are dealing with a lot of features that we actually do in our daily basis. So it's we cannot have a perfect single line, because let's say I am 69, there's a possibility of girl who is being 68. So those points are actually lying close to you, and there's a chance that there's a girl who is even 70. So you just cannot use a hard margin classifier that just do it, because it may result to a very bad performing model. So that's what soft margin classifier does, is that it actually allows some data points to fall inside the margin, so that it doesn't overfit or perform bad.
Okay, you
And
talked
that
about
is from where the concept came.
overfitting.
Okay.
Can you explain me what is overfitting?
Okay, so overfitting means high variance and low bias. Actually, what does that mean is that when our model is actually picking up too much noise from our data, and it's like any little change or any significant change in our data set will result in a lot of errors. So what it does is that it may perform good on your trained data, but if you visualize it comparison to trained data and test data, it will perform really poor in your test data. So this is what overfitting does.
And how to minimize overfitting if you have a certain model? You know that.
Okay,
that
you can actually use you can actually introduce some bias. So like in regression, in linear regression, the project that I said, I actually use regularization. But it does it that it introduces a little bias. So if I go in deep, in linear regression, what we are doing is that we are minimizing our residual sum of squares. Okay, but when we use regularization, what we do that if we, let's say I'm using L1 regularization, it will try to minimize that residual sum of squares plus another term which will be the sum of all the coefficients. So now my aim is just not to minimize that RSS, but also those terms. So this actually help us to introduce some little more bias so that our model doesn't turn to overfit. And
Can you
like
explain me? So as you talked about regularization, can you explain me like what are the different types of regularization and what are the
okay,
differences?
sure. Yeah, okay. So first one is will be your L1 regularization, that is your lasso lasso. So what is that is that it adds an extra penalty equal to the sum of the coefficients of your features, and it can lead to some sparse model, meaning that some features may actually turn out to be the zero. Okay, and sometimes it's a really good model because like previous question that you asked, that if you're showing it to someone else, I cannot explain to them a lot of features. Like there's a chance that maybe I only want to tell them most important feature that we have. So at that point of time, L1 L1 regulation is really good. After that, we have L2 regularization. What is that? It also adds a penalty equal to the square sum of your coefficients. Second, third one will be your elastic net. What is that? Is that actually combines both of them. And in the project, when I looked at it, what elastic net actually does, it tends a little bit towards lasso regression. It tends little less to the ridge regression, that is your L2. Okay, it tends to L1 more. So that is your 3 types of regularization.
Okay, so you talked about you have worked on this linear regression problem, right? So how,
Yes.
what are the assumptions of linear regression? Can you tell me that how do you know that in this data I can use linear regression?
Okay, so the main thing is that we have to make sure that our output and our
And one second,
features.
one more thing. In your project, how does you know that these assumptions are true for the given data? Explain that also.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So like how come these things are true?
Yeah.
So what linear regression takes in consideration that the output must need to be linearly related to our features.
Yep.
Okay, so these assumptions you first have to make. And also one thing that you can confirm, that after making a linear regression, you can actually plot your residual values. Residual values being your the true Y value that you are trying to true Y value and the value you have predicted. If you actually try to subtract them and you plot those residual plots, they must need to be what can I say, randomized. They cannot show actually a pattern. So
Yep.
if that doesn't if that's happening, then you can say, okay, my model is performing good with linear regression. But if it tends to, like, you are seeing some kind of pattern over there, so you can say, okay, this is not performing good with my linear model. I can then move forward to my polynomial model.
Apart from that, certain assumption regarding the data.
Okay, certain assumption regarding the data, that data are actually not highly correlated with each other, that
And
they do not have any synergy concept in each other.
and how do you know that the given data that you have is not highly correlated with each other?
Actually, you can plot a correlation plot to actually look at that.
And what is correlation?
Correlation will actually tell you the relation between two data sets.
Two
And
data
in our
set.
case, in our case, two features.
Okay, and how does that correlation tells me relationship between two features? What does this relationship means?
Okay, so let's say you have it varies between 1 to -1. Okay, and let's say that my values is somewhat equal to 0.89. There are two features, X and Y, and say that these features are 0.89. And what am I saying is that if there are two features and that this is the high amount of time. So if one feature changes, that the another feature will also change to 0.89 of its time. And if it's in negative, I'll say that they're inversely. Though what will happen if that one change, so that it will change it to -0.89. So this is what it tells.
So okay, let us assume that we have two features, X and sin X. What do you
Yes.
think the correlation coefficient will be here?
X and sin X.
Yep. Okay, leave it. So
I'm sorry.
okay, no, not an issue. What are the different type of correlation? Do you know, or which correlation you have used in the given problem statement?
Okay, so
There will be
like
different correlation coefficients.
yeah, okay, so like there's one correlation that is that we know that where we compare it between two data sets or two features. Another one is autocorrelation function where we compare
No,
it
no, no, no,
to
no.
itself.
Only say only correlation. There will be different correlation coefficients. There are
Different
different, yeah.
correlation coefficients. I'm sorry, I
Pearson,
do not know about
Spearman,
that.
Pearson, Spearman. if you know.
Oh yeah. Pearson's correlation coefficient.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is Pearson correlation coefficient is basically the ratio of the covariance between two features or two data set and this product of their standard deviation.
Okay, there are certain different types of correlation coefficients that you can use depending on the data. This Pearson
Yes.
will tell you that how one feature is linearly dependent on or
To
linearly,
another.
yeah. But there will be scenario as here it is in y equal x and sin x, or maybe any other scenario in which there will be no linear relationship, but relationship between these two features is very important. So for that scenarios, there are different correlation coefficients, Spearman, rank, and there are also some, so you can find them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kanishk,
Yes.
let's
Yes.
talk a bit of statistics then, given your interest in numbers and stats. You mentioned about correlation. What's the
Yes.
difference between correlation and covariance, and why do we have covariance in the first place? Why can't we just use correlation?
So okay, like I'm not sure about this, but like if covariance is basically telling us that how much our two data is actually different, like differentiating between each other. Okay, like how much it like what can I say, dispersing from each other. So when we talk about actually covariance between two features, so we are actually telling that how much dispersing they have between each other. You're not, so that what I guess covariance it's about.
Okay, so do you know about coefficient of variation?
I'm sorry, I haven't heard about this.
Okay, no problems. So anyway, I mean, how is let's talk about a bit of mathematics behind linear regression. If you didn't have sklearn in the first place, and you still had to do some sort of linear regression, you had to find out some model, and you had to create your own package of linear regression, let's say. So can you give me the stepwise approach to explain a mathematician that this is how a linear regression can be done to a data set? Let's assume a simple data set. Let's assume a X column and a Y column. Someone has leaked the information that, okay, I'm dead sure that X and Y are linearly related. So, okay, Jayesh's question is answered. Everything assumes linear relationship. How do you approach it? You have Python with you, but not about programming right now. But let's talk a bit about math behind it. How would you do it?
Okay, so like there is what we use, that is a ordinary least squares, and these are the like first let's say I make an equation over there. I have y hat and I'll say that I have a beta coefficient beta naught plus beta 1x. So what OLS it does, it actually help us to predict those like get to know about these coefficients. So like I can use ordinary least squares method. It is there, I have done it, but what can I say, like this is actually we can calculate it. We have Pearson correlation coefficient comes into play. I'll just say that actually if mathematically we can say that our beta 1 is somewhat Pearson correlation into the ratio between the two standard deviations. So between the two features, so like I can calculate the standard deviation for like each feature, and after that I'll calculate their Pearson correlation coefficient, and then I can get the values of beta, and and after that I can plug into my equation to get to know each value.
So
No,
Ganesh, you
but
talked about residual sum of squares a little bit a while back. So maybe you can
Yeah.
try like how
By using residual
like
sum
by
of.
connecting it with linear regression, how residual sum of squares works in linear regression.
Yeah,
Okay.
think about
What
it
is
that
our
way, yeah.
objective? Because there is an equation to solve, and
Yes.
we have an objective. So try to connect
Okay,
it.
so what we'll do is that, say let's say that we have a line. So what we actually do, that we have to like each point, okay, we are gonna linearly fit a point, and what our objective is that we have to actually minimize the residual sum of squares. So what actually it is that from a point we will draw a square over there, okay, and we will have to minimize it from every point, so that after that we are done with the drawing. After we are done with drawing that linear model, that the square distance that coming from there should be least.
And how will that be minimized?
Like I cannot say how much.
Let's simplify the entire thing. You have X, you have Y. That's supervised learning for you. You have both
Yeah.
of these things. I am telling you the relationship is Y equals to MX. Okay.
Yes.
I'm dead sure. But I need to find M. Machine learning gives me M, right? But I need to find M not by using sklearn. I hate that product. Maybe I have problems with the package, but I can trust a mathematician. How do you find the best M? That's the thing that I'm asking you. How would you code it? I mean, before coding, you would need to think, right? You cannot use anything. That's the rule of the game. You
Yeah.
cannot use Pearson. You cannot use sklearn. You cannot use the import term except for NumPy and Pandas and Matplotlib.
Don't use it in on Python only. You have to solve it in the
Yeah, let's
paper.
say 5 points I'm giving you on curve
5
fitting
points, yeah.
example. How would you do it? What's the thought process behind finding the M?
Just a second, let me think.
Sure, take your time.
Okay, do you know about gradient descent?
Yes, I do know.
So
Sorry, I couldn't answer that question right now. I'm not
No
getting
worries. Yeah.
No, not an issue.
No
So
worries. Yeah.
what do you know
Oh.
about gradient descent? What is gradient descent?
Okay, so like gradient descent is type of an algorithm which actually help us to it's an actually first order iterative algorithm which will actually help us finding a local minimum of our function. Let's say we are the idea behind is that to move in the opposite direction of the move in the opposite direction of the gradient.
Yeah,
And
okay,
at
yeah,
some
it will find the minimum. And
Yes,
do you
so
know loss functions are there for the regression, linear
yes,
regression?
yes.
So can we minimize this? We can get the value of your W weights and biases, beta 1, beta 2 you're talking, by
s-
minimizing the loss function using gradient descent.
yes, actually in sklearn first, if you are look at the normal version of the sklearn in linear regression, it
No,
uses
no,
actually
sklearn, leave sklearn. It's just
okay.
for
Yes,
linear
you can
regression.
actually, yes, you can for linear regression definitely use gradient descent to actually find those beta coefficient. Actually, our main objective is for that we are like what cost function is that it actually tells us the loss that we are actually facing or like measure of how actually good our model is. So
Yeah,
like if we are the main, so like that what is we are actually trying to minimize our loss function.
yeah,
Sorry, cost function.
yeah.
So
Anything,
like we
loss and
can do
cost will
this.
be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So we can do it using the gradient descent.
So yeah, that's how linear regression works. You are getting the value of beta 1 and beta 2, your weights, by decreasing your cost function using gradient descent, and the value that you find out for the coefficients, those will be value corresponding to a best fit line. And
And
then you
that's why
solve
the
the
name is regression. I mean,
regression.
if it was something we could find by increasing something, here we are decreasing the cost. If it was increasing something, it would be linear progression. So
Yeah,
that's how the naming convention goes. Yeah.
that's why regression.
So yeah, I mean, really good answers. I mean, let's talk. We are short on time, so let's summarize a bit of things. I want to ask you something very true or false kind of question. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So I want to ask you, exploratory data analysis helps me decide how to pre-process data. Is this true or false?
It's true. Yes.
Can you give me an example? Quick example. rapid fire.
Okay, so quick example, let's say that I have I have a null value or some value in ages, and there's a chance that the ages is actually teenagers. So I just cannot look at the entire data and tell so I can actually use interpolation method, and for interpolation I actually must need to have a domain knowledge regarding that, or if I do not have domain knowledge, I must need to have the little bit of insights on that data. So
Okay.
first,
Yeah.
it's not exploratory data analysis, but you can do some visualization and all.
Yeah, okay, great.
Sure.
One question from my side. Again, first question. You have an unbalanced data set. You have two classes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
class 1 and class 2, and 90% of the data corresponds to class 1 and 10% to class 2. So what metrics will you use here to get the performance of your model?
Okay, so definitely
Okay, leave
using
it.
just
Can you use accuracy? Can you use accuracy in this case?
no, standalone, no, definitely no.
Okay.
Good.
So what are the other, what are the some names of some other?
You can it's not good to actually just look at the one metrics that I'm saying it again. You can consequently look at the recall, precision,
Mhm,
true
mhm.
positive rate, and false positive rate.
Okay.
So if you have an imbalanced classes, at least given these 5 of these, you will see a model performing really poor in at least one of these
Yeah,
model.
great. So
Can you
yeah, and
explain just a
Yeah.
follow-up question in this? Can you explain me like in which cases do we give weight to recall and in which cases do we give weight to precision? So basically, in which case we will give more attention to precision and in which case we will give more attention to recall? For example, let's talk about it's a cancer prediction problem.
yeah,
You want to predict breast cancer. So will you give more weight to precision or more weight to recall?
Just a second.
Don't have much time. Let me know. Let us know.
I guess recall. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
recall. I guess recall.
okay. So I think we can conclude the interview. Divyanshu.
Yeah, I think great interview. A lot of things to cover yet. So let us know, Kanishk, if you want to reappear for a part 2 kind of thing, more hands-on kind of an interview procedure. But this was surely great. We are running short on time, so we have to end this. But an overall opinion from my side would be, I mean, really good. I mean, you are going.
Yeah.
You're catching the entire thing by its neck. So that's a good thing you are doing. Keep that spirit up. Try to look into stats and try to connect everything, why everything is related. Before getting into any algorithm, try to think how a mathematician would have thought of it. So that troubleshooting gets better and your maturity, and people would be really impressed by that thing. So yeah, that's it from my side, Mukul. Jayesh.
Yeah, because
from my side, I
majority,
really liked your presentation. So from a fourth year student perspective, it was really good. Your
Thank you very
speaking
much.
and your explanation of the concept was and taking examples, it was really good.
yeah, majority of the problems can be solved by statistics and mathematics only. So you can more focus on that instead of going behind the algorithm. So okay, I think
Okay.
then great.
Great.
Yeah, sure will do.
This
Thank you
is
very much.
Thank
sure,
you, Kanish. Thank
Petroleum from
you.
scratch. Signing off.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.